What's the matter? What happened?
Looks like he might have a sprained ankle.
No, hold on. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a fractured tibia. I think we better get some x-rays.
You mean it's broken? It can't be.
They were the perfect family, on screen. But behind the wholesome charm of 8 is Enough was a storm of secrets, scandals, and sorrow. Addiction, mental breakdowns, tragic deaths. 11 cast members gone. What happened when the spotlight faded? Was it fame, fate, or something far more chilling? Decades later, the untold truth behind one of TV's most beloved families is finally coming to light, and it's darker than anyone ever imagined. Adam Rich as Nicholas Bradford. He was America's little brother, mop-top haircut, big brown eyes, and a smile that made millions melt. At just 8 years old, Adam Rich became the breakout star of 8 is Enough, playing Nicholas Bradford with a charm that felt effortless. But fame that comes too early often leaves a heavy price, and Adam would spend the rest of his life trying to escape the shadow of his childhood. As the youngest Bradford, Rich embodied innocence. But when the cameras stopped, reality hit hard. By 14, he was experimenting with marijuana. By 17, he had dropped out of high school. The scripts were gone, the fans had moved on, and Adam was left wondering who he was without the character that made him famous. What followed was a slow, painful unraveling. He overdosed on Valium in 1989. He was arrested for breaking into a pharmacy in 1991. Through the 1990s and 2000s, he battled depression, addiction, and the crushing weight of being a former child star in a world that had no idea how to help him. Despite multiple stints in rehab, the relapses kept coming. Yet even in the darkest moments, there were flickers of the boy fans once adored. In 2022, Adam tweeted that he had been sober for 7 years. He urged others to keep fighting. It was a message full of hope, a glimmer of survival. Then came the news no one wanted to hear. On January 7, 2023, Adam Rich was found dead in his Los Angeles home. The cause? An accidental fentanyl overdose. He was just 54. Fans were heartbroken. He had tried so hard to make it back, but the past was too heavy. The fame, too early. The silence, too long. Do child stars ever really stand a chance? Or does Hollywood build them up just to watch them fall? Tell us what you think. This conversation still hits a nerve. Diana Hyland as Joan Bradford. She was the heart of the Bradford family, gentle, radiant, and full of quiet grace. When Diana Hyland appeared as Joan Bradford in 8 is Enough, she brought more than acting talent. She brought soul. But tragically, just as the show began, her life was slipping away. Hyland was no newcomer. With roles in Peyton Place and her Emmy-winning turn in The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, she had already proven she could light up the screen. But what no one knew during those early episodes was that she was dying. Diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer during filming, Diana tried to keep going, but the disease was relentless. Her final scenes in 8 is Enough are haunting, not because she was acting, but because we now know she was saying goodbye. And behind the scenes, something even more extraordinary was happening. She had fallen in love with her Plastic Bubble co-star, John Travolta. He was just 22. She was 18 years older. But their bond was real. Travolta later called her his first true love, and he stayed by her side through her darkest hours, reading to her, sleeping in hospital chairs, holding her hand until the very end. On March 27, 1977, Diana Hyland died in Travolta's arms. She was only 41. Her last episode aired after her death, leaving fans in shock and leaving a hole in the Bradford family that would never truly be filled. Her death wasn't just tragic, it was cinematic, unforgettable, the kind of real-life heartbreak no script could match. Do you believe in soulmates like John and Diana? Or was it a doomed Hollywood romance? Dick Van Patten as Tom Bradford. He was America's dad. calm, kind, and always in control. Tom Bradford was the rock at the center of 8 is Enough, and Dick Van Patten wore the role like a second skin. But behind that fatherly smile and steady presence was a man quietly battling a deadly illness and rewriting the rules of what it meant to grow old in Hollywood. When Van Patten joined the show in 1977, he was no stranger to fame. He'd been acting since age 7, with a career that stretched from Broadway to early television dramas. But 8 is Enough gave him something different, the chance to be the emotional anchor of a generation. Viewers didn't just watch him, they trusted him. He wasn't just acting. He was parenting a nation on primetime TV. Off-screen, life was refreshingly stable. Married to Patricia Poole since 1954, Van Patten avoided the scandals and chaos that swallowed many of his peers. But even as his career thrived, thanks in part to hilarious roles in Mel Brooks' classics like High Anxiety, Spaceballs, and Robin Hood Men in Tights, his health told a quieter, more dangerous story. Behind the scenes, he was quietly managing type 2 diabetes. He masked the fatigue, the pain, and the slow progression of the disease with the same warmth that made audiences fall in love with Tom Bradford. But in 2006, the facade cracked. A diabetic stroke left him shaken and forced him to slow down. Still, Van Patten didn't retreat. Reinventing himself yet again, he co-founded a natural pet food company, proving he could conquer business just as easily as comedy. On June 23, 2015, Dick Van Patten died in Santa Monica at the age of 86. His passing marked the end of an era. But to millions, he remains the definitive TV dad, proof that decency, warmth, and quiet strength can be just as powerful as any Hollywood performance. Willie Aames as Tommy Bradford. He was the wild child of the Bradfords, rebellious, hilarious, and full of charm. As Tommy Bradford, Willie Aames didn't just play the teenage heartthrob, he lived it. Magazine covers, screaming fans, and the kind of fame most kids only dream about. But what happens when the applause fades and the spotlight turns cold? Aames was just 17 when 8 is Enough made him a household name. His smile lit up the screen, but behind it was a boy unprepared for the price of fame. The transition from teen idol to adult actor proved brutal. Roles dried up, confidence cracked. And that's when the darkness crept in. Alcohol became his escape, a quick fix for deeper wounds he didn't know how to name. He later confessed to spiraling so far that he ended up homeless, sleeping under bushes in parks, ashamed to be recognized. At his lowest, the former TV star was broken, and invisible to a world that once adored him. His fall was public, painfully so. But what came next was something few expected, a comeback, not to fame, but to himself. Willie Aames chose to fight. He got sober. He confronted the guilt, shame, and trauma that had haunted him since his youth. He rebuilt his life from the ground up, becoming a cruise director, a faith-based speaker, and eventually, a director and producer behind the camera. Alongside his wife, he co-wrote the memoir, Grace is Enough, laying bare the full scope of his descent and redemption. Now 65, Aames isn't chasing stardom. He's mentoring others, helping those who walk the same dangerous path he once did. His story is one of Hollywood's most dramatic transformations, a raw, brutal fall, followed by a rise fueled not by fame, but by grace. Tommy Bradford may have been the TV rebel, but Willie Aames is the real survivor. Dennis Patrick as Senator Ned Atkins. He walked into 8 is Enough with the gravitas of a seasoned statesman. On screen, Senator Ned Atkins was powerful, polished, a symbol of American authority. Off-screen, Dennis Patrick carried the same commanding presence. But what fans didn't know was that this respected Hollywood veteran was heading toward one of the most tragic and chilling exits in the show's history. Born in 1918 in Philadelphia, Patrick had already lived 1,000 lives before joining the Bradfords' world. A World War II veteran turned Broadway actor, he was known for playing villains with razor-sharp charm, most notably on Dark Shadows, where his eyes could chill a room. But behind the stoic roles and impeccable suits was a man growing increasingly weary of Hollywood's spotlight. By the time he arrived on 8 is Enough, Patrick had seen fame rise and fade like a tide. He never chased headlines, rarely gave interviews, and distanced himself from Hollywood's chaos. While his contemporaries courted fame, he chose quiet dignity. He gave the Bradfords an edge of political realism, and then disappeared back into privacy. But fate had other plans. On October 13, 2002, a fire broke out in Dennis Patrick's Los Angeles home. When firefighters arrived, it was already too late. Investigators believe he was overcome by smoke before he had a chance to escape. The man who had survived war, showbiz, and a shifting industry was taken by something as senseless as an accidental blaze. His death shocked fans, not just because it was so sudden, but because it was so hauntingly out of step with the control and strength he always projected. He had lived with elegance, acted with precision, and vanished in silence. To this day, his name lingers like a whisper, a reminder that even the strongest roles can't protect us from life's cruelest plot twists. Lani O'Grady as Mary Bradford. She was the strong one, the sensible sister. On screen, Mary Bradford held the chaotic Bradford clan together with a level head and mature heart. But off-screen, Lani O'Grady was barely holding herself together at all. From the outside, she had it all: fame, talent, beauty. But behind her confident smile was a war no one saw coming. Panic attacks began in her late teens. At 21, she was formally diagnosed with panic disorder. Acting, red carpets, even simple interviews became terrifying. After 8 is Enough ended, so did her ability to cope. She withdrew from Hollywood. The anxiety worsened. Then came the pills. Lani didn't just take what doctors prescribed. She started self-medicating, Valium, alcohol, anything to quiet the storm inside her mind. In a 1994 interview, she admitted that sometimes the panic felt like she was crawling out of her own skin. Desperate for relief, she checked herself into Cedars-Sinai's mental health unit in 1998. Friends say she was determined to heal. For a moment, it seemed like she might win, but the damage had been done. Years of addiction and untreated trauma had worn down her body. On September 25, 2001, Lani O'Grady was found dead in her California home. She was only 46. The coroner found lethal levels of Vicodin and Prozac in her system. To this day, it's unclear whether it was intentional or a tragic accident. Her death devastated fans who had seen her as the together one. But it also exposed a brutal truth. Mental illness doesn't care how strong you look on TV. Do we talk enough about mental health in Hollywood, or only when it's too late? Let us know your take. This one cuts deep. Don Matheson as Father Robert. He wasn't a Bradford, but when Don Matheson appeared as Father Robert, he brought a calm, commanding energy that left a lasting impression. Stoic, spiritual, and full of quiet power, he was the kind of character that didn't need many lines to make you stop and listen. But behind the composed exterior was a life filled with love, heartbreak, and one final battle that even this TV priest couldn't win. Born in Michigan in 1929, Matheson was no stranger to discipline. Before acting, he served in the military and trained as a strict, no-nonsense leader, traits he brought to every role. Sci-fi fans still remember him as the intense colonel from Land of the Giants, but it was 8 is Enough that introduced him to a new audience, families. Off-camera, Matheson had his own Hollywood love story. He fell for his Land of the Giants co-star Deanna Lund, and their chemistry led to marriage in 1970. They had a daughter, Michelle, who would follow in their artistic footsteps. For a time, it seemed like a dream, two stars building a family in the spotlight. But as often happens in showbiz, the dream didn't last. The marriage collapsed under the weight of long shoots, career changes, and quiet emotional distance. Friends said the divorce hit Matheson hard. He was a private man, but the pain was written in his silence. Years later, he found peace again, remarrying and stepping away from fame. He never chased the limelight. Instead, he chose roles that mattered to him and left the rest behind. Then came the diagnosis: lung cancer. It progressed quickly, too quickly. He faced it like he had faced everything, with strength, calm, and no complaints. On June 29, 2014, Don Matheson passed away at age 84. No scandals, no spotlight. Just the quiet end of a man who gave everything to his craft. Michael Thoma as Principal Dorsey. He didn't have many scenes, but when Michael Thoma stepped into the role of Principal Dorsey on 8 is Enough, he brought something rare: quiet authority, the kind of presence that didn't need drama to be unforgettable. But behind the polished performance was a man racing against time and losing. Born in Detroit in 1926, Thoma was a seasoned pro by the time he walked onto the Bradford set. Before TV came calling, he spent decades on the stage, mastering Shakespeare at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. He wasn't flashy. He was steady, grounded, an actor's actor, the one others trusted to get the job done without the ego. That same discipline shaped his Hollywood career. Guest spots on the streets of San Francisco, The Rockford Files, and dozens more gave him a reputation: dependable, talented, deeply respected. But it was 8 is Enough that let him step into a role that felt almost autobiographical, a man trying to guide the next generation with grace. Then came the diagnosis: quiet, devastating, cancer. Michael Thoma didn't go public. There were no interviews, no headlines, no pleas for attention. He just kept working. Friends say he pushed himself harder, pouring everything into every scene, every word, as if he knew each role might be his last. And then he was gone. On September 3, 1982, Thoma died at just 55 years old. The news barely made a ripple in Hollywood. No scandal, no spotlight, just silence. But for those who watched closely, who remember his calm, his control, and the wisdom he brought to the screen, his legacy lingers. Susan Richardson as Susan Bradford. She was the spunky, lovable daughter of the Bradford clan, the one with the quick comebacks and bright smile. On 8 is Enough, Susan Richardson seemed like the girl who had it all. But fame is rarely kind, and behind her on screen, Sparkle was a life slowly falling apart. At just 25, Richardson became a household name. When she got pregnant during the show's run, producers did something groundbreaking. They wrote her real pregnancy into the script. It felt like a win for women in Hollywood. But the pressure came fast. She gained 90 pounds during pregnancy, and in a cruel twist, she was told she might lose her job if she didn't slim down. Desperate, she turned to cocaine to shed the weight, a choice that would haunt her for decades. By the late 80s, Richardson made headlines for all the wrong reasons. She claimed she had been held captive in South Korea, an odd, confusing story that many believed hinted at deeper mental health struggles. Work dried up. Her marriage collapsed. The money disappeared. In 2013, a shocking interview revealed the full extent of her fall. She was living in a broken-down trailer in Pennsylvania with no heat, surviving on disability checks. She'd had 3 strokes, lost teeth from digestive illness, and was battling diabetes. Hollywood forgot her, but fans never did. Today, Susan Richardson lives in quiet isolation, far from the fame that once defined her. Her story is heartbreaking, yes, but it's also a brutal reminder of what happens when the spotlight turns off. Henderson Forsythe as Big Bud. He wasn't a Bradford, but when Henderson Forsythe stepped into the role of Big Bud on 8 is Enough, he brought a grounded presence that made you stop and listen. Calm, wise, and quietly commanding, Big Bud was one of those rare side characters who felt like he'd lived a full life before he even spoke a word, and so had Forsythe. Born in 1917 in Missouri, Henderson Forsythe was a seasoned pro long before the cameras rolled. He wasn't chasing stardom, he was chasing truth in performance. A Tony Award-winning stage actor, Forsythe made his mark as Dr. David Stewart on As the World Turns. But it was his brief appearance on 8 is Enough that gave him a place in one of TV's most beloved families. Though his time on the show was short, he played Big Bud like a man who'd seen it all. The kind of character who didn't need to shout to be heard, who gave advice without judgment, and whose presence reminded the Bradfords and viewers that sometimes wisdom comes quietly. Off-screen, Forsythe lived much the same way. Respected but never loud, accomplished but never boastful. He died on April 17, 2006, at the age of 88. No scandal, no spotlight. Just a legacy of deep, thoughtful work and a reminder that not all heroes in television history stood center stage.